Before filming this video, I had a really hard time choosing what to wear for the video. And one of the reasons was the fact that I'm filming a Rolex Daytona. I mean, it's a Daytona. Very few people in the world get to spend a full week with this watch and just experience what this watch feels like. And although most of the photos that I see on other people wearing Daytonas, it's usually they're dressed up a little bit and they're wearing, something better than just this. But the one thing that I couldn't bring myself to do is actually putting a better outfit, because if there's one thing that I've experienced this week while wearing this Daytona is that this watch, although it's extremely versatile, this watch works absolutely best when you're dressed like this, dressed casual. This watch does not really need you to be top-notch, three-piece suit. No, none of that. Although it works great, I really feel that is not really how a Daytona is supposed to be worn. Later on that in the video. Rolex Daytona is really a watch that does not need much introduction, and you're probably here because you really like the watch, or you've seen the watch before, or you want to see what the hype is all about. And in this episode, I really want to answer a lot of the questions that especially new people to watches that just got introduced to Rolex Daytona have. Some of these questions are simply, why is it so unattainable? I mean, I really have $17,000. Why can't I buy one? I'll answer this question too. Although this watch was born in 1963 and turned 60 years old last year, the watch spent about 40 years of its life. This model spent about 40 years of its life collecting dust on the shelves. The first 2 decades were terrible for Rolex Daytona. Later on, it started picking up a little bit, obviously with Paul Newman's and his whole story that probably deserves a whole episode on its own. But the long story short is Daytona was not a success, was not a hit, and that is the most fascinating thing about this piece. This watch started picking up, I would say about 10-15 years ago, little by little, but the thing that really drove this watch to the moon is the auction that took place in 2017 in New York, where this watch, or Paul Newman's Daytona, his actual Daytona, was sold for $17 million. It was the most expensive bid in the world for a wristwatch at the time. That is what really catapulted this watch into it not being available anywhere else. You see a lot of the people complain and ask the question. I went to a boutique a couple days ago and I expressed to them that I wanted Rolex Daytona, and they pretty much laughed at me and told me I gotta wait 5 years. What's going on? Why is it the way it is? I mean, I have the money, and that is the one question that bothers a lot of people. And you see, the simple answer is supply and demand. It is not hard to understand. When people want something and that something is not available, or it's available very limited quantity, there will be a bloodbath if the 2, 3, 4 Daytonas the boutiques have would just be available. And the one thing they have to do is they have to be very selective on who they give these watches to. The other question that you probably have is, why does Rolex like to keep this supply and demand? Why can't they just produce more watches to supply the market? And that also has a very good answer, probably an answer that you did not expect. And that is the fact that Rolex produces 1 million watches per year, roughly. And to put those numbers into a perspective, you have to understand that Rolex's biggest competitor, Omega, produces about half of that only. Produces about 500 to 600,000 pieces. Tag Heuer produces about 700,000 pieces. You have Breitling with 200,000, and you have Patek with 70,000 pieces. So to say that Rolex is killing it, it's an understatement. Now, the one thing that really annoys Rolex, and not only Rolex, but they are the ones being in such a position, not very many brands are in such a position, fortunate position I should say, is the fact that their product goes on the gray market for double to triple the price. And Rolex charging you $17,000 for a Daytona, then they have to go back and cover all the overhead they have. They have employees to pay, they have a building, they have a management structure. They have a lot of things that they have to pay from these $17,000 per Daytona that they charge. And if you sell that Daytona, which people sell it for $35,000, it's literally double. You're literally selling it and making the profit. You're making more profit than Rolex themselves. And I would assume that would angry a lot of you out there. You yourself had a product that you couldn't keep it on the shelves. Everyone would want it. You'd probably get extremely excited until you'll find it on Marketplace going for double the price. You'll sit and look for a minute and think, I'm charging $1,000 for this. I have so much shit to pay, and some guy is selling it on Marketplace for $2,000. That's not normal. I have to do something. And so that they really go to boutiques and they really punish the boutiques financially too if they sell this watch to the wrong person. And that puts us in a position where for a dealer to trust you, they really have to know you. You have to have some sort of history with them. And I know that these answers are not really what you expected, and it does feel like maybe I'm siding with the business, I'm siding with Rolex or with the boutiques. That's not really what I'm doing, but that is the case. I'm extremely unhappy myself that I cannot go and just pick up a Rolex whenever I want, maybe even at 5-10% discount like it used to be 20 years ago. But that is the reality. Rolex is extremely picky on who they're going to be selling this watch, because the last thing they want is for someone to buy it and flip it 2 hours later in the same mall. Now going back to Rolex Daytona. Rolex Daytona from the 1963 or from the early times of the Daytona looked extremely different than Rolex Daytona now. This is probably one of the reasons why no one really wanted this watch, and it's been on the shelves for so long, it's just collecting dust, is probably because it was a pretty boring looking watch. Now also, if you look at a sub, or if you look at any of their other models, those watches were tools, right? Those were watches that, although a Submariner was a diver's watch, you didn't really have to be a diver to be buying a Submariner. It just meant that this watch is durable. This watch is built properly, and it will last you and withstand anything through day-to-day activities. Now, Rolex Daytona was a chronograph, was a watch for racing. That's not something everyone does. It looked boring. It did not have a lot going on. And I assume that is one of the reasons why the watch just didn't do well. But I'm very glad that Daytona didn't just give up on it. And I assume they are extremely happy as well that they didn't give up on the model, but they've tried to work things around it. They tried to market it better and overall develop it better. I mean, one of the things is obviously that Paul Newman got his hands on one, and that is one of the things that drove the watch up. But also with time, they've just perfected the watch. They've changed it a little bit. They've added crown guards, they've screwed down the pushers, just made it a little bit more durable looking. They've added ceramic bezel over the years, and they've made the dial a little bit more busy. They've added Daytona written in red right above the subdial at 6 o'clock. They've also made the upper dial a little bit busier too, with a lot of words going on. Right under the Rolex and crown, it says Oyster Perpetual, Superlative, Chronometer, Officially Certified, Cosmograph. It's a lot going on, but to be honest, a week spent with this watch, this was the first time I'm reading what's there. It really does not bother me at all. Although it does feel like a busy dial, this watch is just crafted so carefully, so elegant, and so beautiful. Now, if you're wondering, what is it about this watch that makes it so expensive? I mean, this watch at the end of the day has a bracelet and clasp cheaper than a Tudor Black Bay 58. The bracelet and the clasp really does not feel any better than my Tudor Black Bay. It's loud when you close it. It does not feel $20,000 at all. I do like the fact that the bracelet and clasp have this little bit of extension for whenever you sweat, or for whenever in the summer it gets warmer and you swell, then you can release the watch a little bit to be a little bit larger on your wrist. Although it doesn't have, like the Submariner does, a glide lock mechanism, this still does the job. It feels pretty good. To answer the question on what makes this watch so desirable, in my personal opinion, is simply the fact that there's no watch like it, design-wise. Quality, like I said, it's very good. It's a durable watch. It does not feel insanely elegant by the way the bracelet rattles or sounds when you close it. But the design, they've nailed the size, they've nailed the thickness, they've nailed the looks completely. One of the coolest things about the size is yes, it's 40 millimeters, but it's the thickness. Although this watch is a chronograph, it does have a lot of more components inside than your regular diver or your regular watch that pretty much only has a date window. This watch is much more complicated to run a chronograph and show you the time and all of that in a watch that is about 11 millimeters in thickness. I mean, if you look at a watch like Black Bay Heritage from Tudor, that watch was 14 millimeters, unnecessarily thick. And you will see other chronographs out there that are thicker than this, but one of the things that makes this watch so sleek, to wear so easily and so nice, is the fact that it's thin. At 11-ish millimeters is really on point. I will be ending this video with one important thing. If you're ever in the position to afford to buy a Rolex Daytona, I really want you to wear this watch. This watch is not meant to be put in a box. It's not meant to sit at the bank in a bank vault in your safe. This watch is meant to be worn. Yes, the watch is extremely gorgeous, there's nothing like it, but this watch at the end of the day is meant to be worn. Wear it around the house, make yourself a coffee with the watch on, go clean your car. Who cares if you're gonna put scratches on it? Have beers in your garage with your buddies or by yourself, or go walk the dog. Wear this watch with casual outfits, with simple outfits, around the house with your kids. It really is not that big of a deal. I understand that money is a big of a deal when it comes to this watch, but at the end of the day, it's a watch. You might buy it, put it in a safe, and die tomorrow, or die in 10 years and never worn it, or lose your fucking arms and you'll never be able to wear a watch ever again, and you'll just stare at it like a dummy. Wear the watch. I've had so much fun with this watch. I've cleaned my car in it, I had beers in my garage, I cooked steak, I was dressed like this, I took care of my daughter, I've changed diapers. This watch just fits everywhere, in any condition. It is really versatile. It's meant to be worn. And the guy who lent me this watch wears it a lot. And the watch has a lot of scratches, and a friend of mine took the watch and looked at it because he was very impressed, first time spending time with Daytona, and he was pretty surprised at how many scratches this watch has, and he said, he wears it all the time, really? And I said, what is he supposed to do with the watch? It's a watch. Yes, over the years this watch has gone to insanity, but at the end of the day, in 1963, this was supposed to be a tool. And to this day, it's still a tool. So please wear it, enjoy it, and I'm out.